Ladies and gentlemen, the perspective that I'm going to be presenting this afternoon is one of having established that we have an economic deposit using conventional energy, to being able to look at alternative energy as a possibility of driving this project forward, and it has to be done under similar economic conditions to the conventional energy. During the presentation, obviously, I will be making forward-looking statements. And the outline of the presentation is really just to look at the project initially, to give you a bit of a flavor for what some of the challenges are and the challenges that we've come across and that we've overcome. It's a uranium and vanadium project. And I want to talk a little bit about the socio-economic side of it and social acceptance, and then move on to the power options. The option that has been considered in the PEA, and that's the basis on which this project is economic. And then compare those numbers, one with diesel as one end member, and then some of the alternative energy propositions that we have as well. Now, U3O8 Corp is focused exclusively in South America at the moment, and it's a uranium company. But in fact, the deposit, particularly in Colombia, occurs with the uranium occurs with phosphate and a whole suite of other elements that actually pay for the extraction and obviously the mining of the uranium to make it a zero cash cost producer based on a PEA. Our focus again is on cash cost of production in Argentina, where the cash cost is about, including royalties, about $22 per pound, which is exactly half of the current contract price of uranium. And again, this would be a lower quartile cash cost of production. And we focus on cash cost because unless we can demonstrate to our shareholders that we have a life in this project, that these projects are able to survive through the next cyclical downturn in our resource industry, which is inevitable, we are wasting their money. It's no use having a deposit that's only economic during the good times. And so this company, although it's a minute company, is absolutely focused on creating shareholder value through that fundamental principle. And you'll notice that we have a third project up in Guyana in the north of South America, and that doesn't meet this lower quartile cash cost of production hurdle, and so it's on the back burner for the time being. Focusing in on Argentina, and that's the project that I'm going to be talking about today, there's quite a delicate social situation there. This is an anti-mining province. There is a ban on the use of cyanide and also on open pit mining. And yet with that background, we have been able to negotiate a joint venture option agreement with a company, a resource company that's owned by the provincial government. And this means that we have a responsibility, being the torchbearer for the mining industry in this anti-mining province, to make sure that this Laguna Salada deposit is absolutely outstanding in a number of different aspects. And if we're successful in that, we stand a reasonable chance of being able to encourage the province to drop their ban on cyanide and open pit mining and allow people like Pan American Silver, which has one of the biggest silver deposits on the planet in this province, and also Yamana has a very nice gold deposit up in the Andes. So there's a lot of responsibility on us having got this first agreement with the provincial government. Where we are in the process towards production, we've just got through a year ago the preliminary economic assessment that was extremely detailed, that allowed us to demonstrate as our first step on this project on the economic side that it will be lower quartile production cost. And our next step shows in fact, the PEA shows that the size of the deposit is absolutely crucial for the economics of the deposit. The bigger the deposit, the better the economics are. So that's our next step. But in tandem with that, because the deposit is so simple, we'll do trial mining and pilot plant test work to give us better figures to go into the feasibility study. In terms of the simplicity of this project, it's a gravel. The uranium is in a 1 meter thick layer in an absolutely horizontal gravel plain in the middle of the desert. It's the uranium-bearing layer is about from surface up to about 3 meters below surface, and it's completely unconsolidated. And the mining concept is just to bring in continuous miners that would scoop up the gravel by conveyor into a haulage truck that would just travel a couple of 100 meters, and that gravel would be screened, it would be washed, because the uranium is in the very fine component of that gravel. So we would just wash the silty material off the pebbles, and that fine material would be screened out, slurried, and pumped to a central processing facility. That fluid would be heated to a temperature of 80 degrees, and then we would use 2 products that you find in your kitchen, washing soda and baking soda, to extract the uranium. Whether you visited the mine on day 1 or in year 10 at the end of the mine life, it would simply consist of one trench with continuous miners working within that trench, and that trench would just migrate laterally across the gravel plain. And the continuous miners would be lifting gravel from the leading edge of the trench, and after it's been washed, it would just be replaced on the back side of the trench. The plants and shrubbery on the leading side of the trench would simply be moved and transplanted and planted on the back side of the trench. So the environmental restoration of this operation would be absolutely in lockstep and in tandem with the mining. And at the end of the day, you would have exactly the same gravel, exactly the same vegetation, minus the uranium. Just looking at the drivers of the economics on the project at the moment, let's just look at the right-hand side, that dismal picture of the uranium price. Fukushima obviously hit the uranium industry really hard, and the decline in uranium price since then is because Japan shut down 50 reactors, and there was the perception and the possibility and the risk that uranium fuel could be dumped on the market at any time, and that's why the price has weakened consistently since then. However, on the left-hand side of that diagram is the fundamental demand-supply picture for uranium. And it shows that in about 2019, demand overtakes supply, and it'll be like that for a couple of decades. And in the uranium price graph on the right-hand side, we can start to see the negativity coming out of Japan start to be driven by the fundamentals of that looming supply deficit. So uranium, the fundamentals of the commodity are very good, and obviously the mine life and extending the mine life is fundamental for the economics of renewable energy. This gravel plain that I was talking about is represented in the gray color on this graphic. And the 10 million pound resource area is just the blue footprint there. Wherever we have explored this gravel, we have found uranium, and it's exactly the same setting, about 1 meter or 2 below surface and about 1 meter thick. And this is important because it shows that we have enormous upside in terms of size of this deposit. Its current size is 10 million pounds, but we can already see through the areas that we've explored an additional 20 to 25 million pounds, and the number can go up from there. And this is important because it will extend the mine life beyond the current 10 years. I mentioned that size is absolutely fundamental to the economics of the project. And this is illustrated on the left-hand side of that graphic. The axis is after-tax net present value at a 10% discount rate. And I've illustrated 3 scenarios. The current £10 million deposit, if we double that deposit to £20 million, and if we triple it to £30 million, the NPV goes up. When you double the size of the deposit, the NPV goes up 3 times. When you triple the size of the deposit, the NPV goes up 6 times. So there's huge leverage in there. And also the IRR is illustrated on the right-hand side. I mean, we're starting to get into extremely interesting numbers in terms of the economics of the deposit. So from the fundamental economics of this deposit, we're aligned with the renewables in terms of having potential to extend the life of the operation. Our requirement is about 7.6 megawatts, excuse me. And the location of the project is pretty good in terms of infrastructure. We're 40 kilometers from a gas pipeline and 70 kilometers from a couple of regional power lines. Now, the preliminary economics assessment was based on the economics of a couple of different scenarios. Do we pipe in the gas from this pipeline? Do we put in a 70-kilometer spur off the regional power grid? And there's also gas, available trucked gas. And the scenario that is most economic is outlined in red. It's 7.6 megawatts of electricity pulled in from the national grid and 3 megawatts in heat from propane that would be trucked in. I was asked just to look to present the diesel situation, and you know, on the option that we selected, the capex is about 7.5 million, and the opex over the life of the mine is 50 million. If we were to look at the project being in an entirely different situation, separated from the national grid and looking only at diesel generation, the capex would be 10 million and the OPEX 190 million over the life of the mine. So if this project were located in a different area where we had to use diesel, it would be absolutely uneconomic. We've just been talking about biomass in the previous slide. It's not applicable in this particular semi-desert. Solar, not really. These are measurements taken at right on site, and although we're the same latitude south as Germany is and north, and Germany is making all this progress with solar energy, here it doesn't work without the German taxpayer. In terms of solar thermal, remember we have to get that leach fluid up to 80 degrees. And again, you know, this is marginal. I mean, if we're looking at using propane, the capital cost for the propane burners is just over $500,000, and it's just under $1 million a year in OPEX. So totaling that, you come out around about 10 million over the life of the mine. Looking at solar thermal, it comes out at more or less the same number, but the problem is that the capex is put in right up front. And that just kills it in terms of competitiveness with the propane. But it's something to work with. If this project were further north in Argentina, the solar thermal would probably be economic. Wind. The blue graph represents measurements taken at a little weather station on site over a 3-year period. So this is taken at an elevation of about 2 meters. And those are average wind speeds. So, you know, the important thing is that the wind blows throughout the year. On the right-hand side is the regional graphic of wind speeds. And you can see Patagonia lights up in fact, it's dark, in the dark red. at average wind speeds in that area of 8 to 9 meters per second. That's average. And bear in mind that the wind only blows for about 10 or 12 hours a day, so the wind speed is right up there when it does blow. So we've been looking conceptually at wind. It looks as though it's a possibility. It could be viable in that area. And we've just taken a very, very broad approach to this. Looking at about 15 megawatts of power, so 10 turbines of 1.5 megawatts each. But the crucial thing, sorry, the capex on that would be about 30 million, which is very similar to the Diavik number that we heard about earlier. The OPEX is very, very low, less than $1 million a year. But the problem is the power storage. I mean, looking at a conceptual situation of 10 megawatt storage, the capex is 40 million and about $1 million per year in OPEX. That is what the issue is. I mean, you know, the total concept of having that combined situation of turbines and power storage would bring us to a capex of something like 70 million, and then only 2 million in OPEX per year. But that 70 million would kill the project because it's right up front. Our total capex for the project is just under 120 million US. So in summary, representing first on the left-hand side the current conventional mixture of electricity from the grid and propane for heating. Capital cost about 7 million and then 50 million in OPEX over the life of the mine. The combination of the wind turbines and energy storage, CapEx 70 million and about 19 million in OPEX over the life of the mine, and then diesel is just on a different scale. However, if we extend the life of the mine, these figures start to be interesting. If we look at a 20-year scenario, then the wind option starts to look much more interesting. It's much more competitive. We're still sitting with the 70 million upfront capex issue, and we'll come back to that, I'm sure, in the discussion afterwards. That is the biggest problem with wind, or in fact any of the other alternative energy sources. But I think that what we set out to do in this study was having a conventional power source that works, that makes this project economic. We wanted to see with very broad brush strokes whether alternative energy would work, whether it's economic in this area. And I think that we've demonstrated that it might not be quite economic yet, or there's certainly some challenges, but it's certainly worth looking at. And I think the exciting thing that's been alluded to many times today is the rate at which both energy storage and the cost of wind power generation and solar panels and all the rest of it is reducing over time, or is decreasing over time. I mean, the wind energy, almost 60% reduction over a 5-year period. And remember that we only have to make the decision as to whether to go into production in Laguna Salada in about 2 years' time. So I think that we certainly will be looking very carefully at alternatives, particularly wind, for this project to make it a flagship project in an area, in a province that is absolutely anti-mining at this stage. But we need help in getting over this capital hurdle, the upfront capital hurdle by the suppliers. Without your help, it's not going to work. Thanks very much.